Okay, so my name's Libby and I'm the Energy Advisor from Argyll and Bute Citizens Advice Bureau. And amongst all the other information we support people with, we also give advice about energy. And that's from energy needs within the house or different types of benefits that might support their energy costs and energy efficiency measures that they can get support with to put in the home. And every winter we do a range of presentations to different community groups, helping people to understand what help is available, either from other agencies that we partner with or directly from ourselves. We start our presentation always with a wee bit of a quiz. So the first one says that a standing charge is a fixed daily cost no matter how much energy is used. Is that true or false? Okay, quite unanimous. The standing daily charge is what we're paying for the privilege of having an energy source be brought to our home. So it's presumably covering the cost of all the infrastructure, the administration, the metering, management of the meters and everything else. That's what Ofgem would tell you. Interestingly enough, part of the unit price, the reason why that goes up and down is that that also factors in those costs. So it's a bit of a minefield when you look into it, but essentially the difference between a unit cost and a standing charge is that you will always pay a standing charge every day as long as there is a supply coming to your property, but the unit charge is just for the amount that you actually use. Okay, I think of it like road tax. So whether you're driving on the road or not, you pay road tax for 365 days a year, and then you use petrol, you use fuel to actually do mileage. And it's a very similar kind of difference on the surface. When you dig deeper, a bit more complicated. The next one says the price cap limits how much a supplier can bill a customer. False, okay. You're right, it's false. The price cap sets a unit price that the suppliers can't go above. It's worth checking that your supplier has altered your tariff to make sure it's in line with the price cap, because there have been cases where people's tariff haven't been tweaked to fit the price cap, but ultimately the bill will reflect how much energy you've used. So when they talk in the media about the average household having to pay $1,900 based on the latest price cap, it's very misleading because there is no average household. To have a huge house with one person living in it in one room, watching a telly and having a fire, a coal fire, their electricity bill would be really small for that massive house. You could have somebody else living in a one-bedroom flat with electric guitars, PlayStations, computers, iPods, and their electricity use would be much bigger. So even the size of the property isn't really going to help you work out how much energy somebody uses, because it's about our behaviour within the house. Third one is E marked next to a meter reading on a bill means the bill is what? E is certainly for estimated. And that should happen if they don't have an accurate meter reading at the supplier. Unfortunately, people have found even when they've given a meter reading, they still end up getting an estimated bill. And I've recently had a case where somebody's told they're going to keep getting estimated bills because they don't have a smart meter, and the energy company is therefore being frustrated that they're not getting daily or hourly meter readings. I'm looking into that because we can't be forced to have smart meters, and actually there is no reason you should have to pay an estimated bill. You can always demand an accurate bill before you pay it. Of course, the drawback there is if you're not making regular payments to your energy use, you could be building up a debt. So most people want to pay something, but the estimated bills make managing our budget for our fuel much more difficult. And just like Angela said, the last one was a trick question. The belief is that smart meters will make estimated billing, back billing, and manual meter reads a thing of the past. The idea being that the smart meter is meant to send your energy readings directly to the supplier so that they always know in real time exactly how much energy you're using. The drawback we have in Argyll is that the data communication company who are responsible for improving the network and the signal that the smart meters use to do that communication have largely ignored us and not improved our signal infrastructure. So there are loads of villages across Argyll and Bute where the smart meters won't communicate to the supplier and they have to be operated in dumb mode, which basically means the same as a traditional meter. So you could still get yourself a smart meter, but you'd have to keep giving meter readings anyway. So not much use with that. So this session basically covers the kind of help that's available and the things that we're likely to give advice on at the Bureau. And we're sort of going to do a whistle-stop tour of a couple of subjects here. This is the Priority Services Register, the winter heating payment, the warm home discount, the child winter heating assistance, the winter fuel payment, and then the Home Energy Efficiency Programme for Scotland. So starting off, we'll look at the Priority Services Register because we take that very seriously at the Bureau and encourage everybody who's eligible to sign up. So every energy company operates its own register where if you fulfill their criteria, generally having a health condition or being a certain age, then you can be registered for priority services so that there are certain extra services that get offered to you to make life a wee bit easier. And they are things like a free gas appliance check, getting your meter moved, relocated, so it's easier for you to access it, getting a password protection scheme so that if anyone comes to your door from the energy company, you can ask them for the password and not just let them in case they're a bogus caller. You should be able to get at least quarterly meter readings. If you are on the PRS, it should be a given that you can request that and have that. Bill nominee scheme means that somebody that you've named can actually access your bills and talk to the energy company about your bills, but won't be liable for your bills. So it can be a mistake to have a friend, a relative, or trusted neighbour have their name put on your bill just so that they can help you, because they would then be sharing liability for any debt. So the way to do it instead is to have somebody nominated. They'll have absolutely no liability, but they can help to manage your bills and your relationship with the energy company. You're supposed to then also get advance notice of supply interruptions. Obviously, that's planned interruptions because they can't give us advance notice if a tree falls on the line because they didn't know it was going to happen. But it also would mean if, for example, you're on medical equipment that requires a constant power supply, then they should actually offer you a generator if they know they're going to be turning the power supply off. I have never actually come across anyone, and I've been doing the energy role for about 2 years, never come across anybody that's been offered the generator. And being that we struggle to even get meter readers or engineers to come out, I'd be really keen to see if anybody ever gets that generator, especially if they're on Isla or, one of the islands, because I can't see that happening. But that might be my cynicism with the energy companies. So, and you can also get bills in alternative formats. They don't specify what that is. I suspect it's generally Braille. They may do audio versions of your bill, possibly as well. So yeah, each energy company runs its own priority services register, and sadly, the criteria for each one will differ slightly, and we don't know why that hasn't been regulated, but it hasn't been. So you need to check with your energy company to find out if you're eligible. But there is an overarching one as well, which is called the PSR Scotland. And if you come to the Bureau table in the main hall, I've got some leaflets that allow you to sign up for that. And that one goes actually through the distribution network. So it would be SSEN, or the mains gas distributor. So you're able to also sign up with them. They're kind of the next level up on the power chain. So next we have a brief look at the warm home discount. So for people who are of pensionable age, and if they're on the pension credit specifically, then they're automatically entitled to get the warm home discount, shouldn't have to apply for it, and it should appear each winter on their energy bill as a rebate effectively, so reducing their cost. It's gone up to £150 for this last winter. There is also in Scotland a surplus of money once they've paid everybody that's automatically eligible, and they make that available to what they call the broader group of people who may be eligible. The government gives it to each energy company and allows them to administer the payment of that. So again, they have their own different criteria for who they're going to give it to, and you have to apply. And it's a little awkward because generally you have to apply through their website. So if you don't have digital access, then it makes it harder for people to make that application. And also the window for getting your application lodged is generally very small because they know they're going to be flooded with requests. So they keep it small to keep the numbers down, basically, because they will probably be turning a lot of people down and saying it's too late, because once it's first come, first serve with the broader group. Once that money's gone, it's gone. So you need, again, to check with your own energy supplier to find out what their criteria are for the warm home discount, okay? But that, as I say, if you're on a low income in terms of pension credit, then that's an automatic payment, specifically because older people are likely to be less mobile when they're at home in the winter, and on a lower income potentially because they don't have access to increasing their income, and so it's support to help them pay bills. The next few things on that content screen have all been added onto this one slide. So we've got the winter fuel payment, which is actually all part at the moment of the cost of living awards. So again, if you're on one of the benefits that entitles you to a cost of living payment, there's a good chance you may be also entitled to the winter fuel payment. You've got to be of pensionable age, and it would be paid to you as part of your pensioner cost of living money. So that's likely to change year on year as the government keep evaluating how much they have for that. But at the moment, people have been receiving between £200 and £600 overall, and some of that is determined or is deemed to be part of your winter fuel payment to help people with their fuel bills. We then have the winter heating payment. They don't make it easy, do they, with the labels they give things. This has replaced the cold weather payment, which you still get in England and Wales. And the criteria for that was that the weather in any particular area had to drop below 0 for 7 consecutive days. And if it did that, and does that in England or Wales, then people will get an additional payment to assist them with their fuel bills. The devolved government in Scotland decided that the cost of the administration for working out the temperature and everything else was eating up the majority of the budget, and it was just much cheaper to give everybody £55 and 5p, weirdly. So that's what my screen says. I suspect a sneaking feeling it's probably £55 and not the 5p, but I've not checked. I should ask my mum because she would get it. So yeah, it's a payment in Scotland once a year to help people with their energy bills, just because we know that our costs are going up. Okay. The child winter heating payment, again, as a considerable sum, £235, just over, for parents or carers of young people and children that have a health condition or disability. So if anyone was eligible for that and not applying for it, they're missing out on some considerable help. And again, the Bureau can provide more tailored information to anybody looking to find out more. So apart from the benefits that we've talked about, there are actually various ways that you can get assistance to address your energy bills, because an energy company has an obligation to make sure that it doesn't plunge you further into financial difficulty. So if you're struggling to pay a bill, then there are conversations you can have with your supplier to negotiate a reasonable repayment of arrears and a payment for your ongoing costs. And again, if people are struggling to do that, which would be not surprising because customers customer services of energy companies are particularly poor for some reason, and that's all of them. I've complaints against all of them on my caseload at the moment. But that's something, again, you can come to the Bureau and we can have that conversation with them. We do have access to other channels within energy companies that hopefully are a bit more prompt and a bit more effective than the grassroots customer services that the general public can get through to. So if you're struggling to have that conversation, you can come to us. As it says here, the repayment arrangements really should take into consideration people's financial ability to actually pay. So you're not supposed to be plunged into further difficulty. That's the idea behind it, but we've heard stories where people are choosing heating over food. So there are worries that people aren't necessarily having those conversations or getting that support that they could be getting to make life a bit easier right now. Of course, another way that we can all help ourselves with reducing the bill is by making our homes more energy efficient in the first place. Again, maybe easier said than done. Certainly, external wall insulation can cost in the region of £50,000 when you're looking at cladding the outside of a building. You've got the cost of scaffolding and cherry pickers, health and safety considerations, and it can be a huge outlay. There can be grants or loans towards it, but you need to weigh up the balance of how much is that going to reduce your bills by? How much is it going to make you, how much more cosy will you be? And will you reap the benefit of it in your lifetime? I'm 51 and I just couldn't reasonably afford to clad the outside of my house, because if I shelled out 50,000, I'd never reap the reward of that in the remainder of my life. So you really need to weigh it up. But there are low cost and no cost options. And I'm sure there's lots of people in the hall today that can give people extra advice about that. Things like draft proofing, which can cost as little as £100 to have a professional draft prover, because a draft proofer is actually a profession. I didn't know that before I started doing this. And for £100, they can come round and detect the sources of the drafts in the home and work out the best and most intrusive way to plug that so that you're not getting so many cold spots in the house from drafts. Insulation, you'll hear it from everyone else, is always a brilliant and low cost and less intrusive way of making sure the heat actually stays in the home. The majority of the heat that we lose in our properties is through the walls and through the roof. So there are some simple ways of getting those improved. And as it points out here, our partners at Home Energy Scotland do grants for some of the lower cost energy efficiency measures. And I think that, again, their focus will shift year on year depending on what they're looking at improving across the country. But there are also interest-free loans. So if you've got a large amount to shell out initially, you can get an interest-free loan so that you're not, you've got time to pay it back without paying a premium for having that. There are initiatives dotted about the country as well, because the Home Energy Efficiency Programme for Scotland is a government initiative where each local authority is given a certain amount of money to help improve the local housing stock. And again, those grants can change year on year depending on what they're focusing on. So many years ago, I believe there used to be quite common funding for double glazing, but another year it might shift and focus more on insulation. Now, the Bureau stand out in the main hall is next to Jackie from the council this year, and her stand is pointing out that there are grants available for getting insulation in the home. So I think insulation is the key this year. But again, rather than this sort of being prescriptive and telling you what's available, we always advise that you go and talk to them or talk to us and ask us to research it for each individual case, because it can change what's available, and the criteria can be dependent on things like the income of the household or the energy performance certificate of the property. This slide was generally used for another wee break in all the dry facts that I'm giving out, was just a way of looking at different behaviour changes that people can make to improve their own energy efficiency. Things that we possibly know, you know, like turning lights off if you're not in the room, the argument of turning your heating down by 1 degree. I always like to point out that is if you're in tropical heat. If you're already down at sort of 18 degrees in the room, don't be turning it down any colder than that. If it goes down to 12 degrees, even healthy active people will start to have their blood thicken if they're in 12 degrees for any prolonged period of time. I live in a wee stone building in Tarbert on Loch Fyne, and when I went into my bedroom last night and turned the heater on just to get the warm room, it was at 7 degrees. So now you know why I'd like to clad my house, but I can't afford to. So these old stone buildings that don't have hot pipes running all the way around the building all the time for central heating can get very, very cold. It's not helped at the moment by the fact that my neighbouring building is empty. So there's no one putting heat on the other side of my wall. But yes, 7 degrees is not healthy at all. So yeah, I have to ramp the heating up in there just to get it to a place where it's comfortable for me to be able to go in and safely sleep in there. So it's particularly the in-home display unit that you get. So your meter would still be on the wall or in a cupboard, but you get a little handheld like mini tablet that shows you when your energy is spiking. So you can go and put the kettle on and watch how many kilowatt hours are suddenly being eaten up by putting that kettle on. And what people have found is they've learnt what their energy usage is like and been able to adapt and be a little bit more savvy about the energy they're using. And in the long run, there is an idea that smart meters are really going to help us as consumers make savings because as there is more and more demand all the time on the national grid, they're wanting to encourage people who can to use energy at off-peak times. But the off-peak times are no longer set times like they used to be because we now have shops open 7 days a week and industries running all the time. So what they're thinking of doing, and there are some already piloting, is time of use tariff, where you can get told by your smart meter, energy is really cheap right now because no one else is using it, and you can go, right, I'll get the laundry on, because you know you're going to get away with doing that at a lower price. And you wouldn't be able to do that if you had a traditional meter. So there are going to be some benefits coming out of having smart meters, but I think it's fair to say that it's been a bumpy journey so far and we're not over that yet. Certainly not here. And I would imagine rural parts of England and Wales and Northern Ireland are finding it exactly the same. So there's a few myths going around, apparently, about smart meters. I will say I've, as a bureau advisor, I've never had anybody mention any one of these to me, but nonetheless, it's in the presentation, which was put together by Citizens Advice Scotland, so I'm assuming they've gathered this from across the whole of the country. You don't have to have a smart meter by law. There is no law saying you have to, but as I've just explained, there's a good chance that it's going to become almost the only way forward for you. There's probably a few great technicians and engineers out there that are hoarding stocks of traditional meters if they're taking them out of someone else's house and they still function. So they might then be the hero of the day and be able to come to you and fit that traditional meter if you're desperate for one. But I suspect there will be a lot of complex toing and froing, red tape and admin time wasted trying to get that done for you. So ultimately, it's going to shift to us all having them, even though it's not a legal issue at the moment. Smart meters can't spy on anybody. All they do, they're not going on the internet and recording data about you. They're literally just talking to your supplier about the energy supply that's coming into your home. So that's all they're doing. They can't be used to collect and sell personal data, which is a weird myth because energy companies kind of already have your personal data. You know, they kind of know the size of the property, they kind of know your name, your address, your phone number, your email address, everything else. That's the kind of data that other companies want to buy because they can then spam you with terrible marketing. So the energy company could already do that illegally if they took the risk. The smart meter will make no difference to that. Smart meters are radioactive. They do use a radio signal to work on, but it has been proved by Public Health England that it is not dangerous to health. There's even a YouTube video to prove it, so people must have been genuinely worried. But if you're willing to walk around with a mobile phone next to your brain all day, then I don't think you need to worry about the radio wave used by the smart meters. Now, we've a couple of slides that I'll rattle through because this is about off-grid and alternative fuel. I understand you're on the gas grid in this area, so it's just worth knowing that liquid petroleum gas and heating oil, which I think gets called red diesel, am I right? Is that the name people give to it? Anyway, that's maybe my belief that's not quite right. Yeah, I think people can use it to heat domestic properties with an oil tank as well. They are non-regulated by the government. So anybody using those forms of heat, if they've chosen to get something fitted so they're not having to heat their home with electricity, so they've gone for LPG or heating oil, they can be charged whatever the supplier wants to charge them. There's no off-gem for these industries, for the non-regulated fuels. However, there are voluntary industry groups that both of these fuel types can sign up for, or suppliers of both of these. So there's UK LPG, which would act as a kind of voluntary regulator for the LPG, liquid petroleum gas. And then there's UK IFTA, which is the UK and Ireland Federation Distribution Association, or Fuel Distribution Association. And again, that will act as a voluntary kind of regulatory body for the heating oil. And both of those have their own version of the Priority Services Register. So if people are vulnerable either for their age or their health or a long-term condition, they could be promised that they would get a delivery in bad weather over and above the fit young people who can do star jumps to keep warm, okay? So if you are using an alternative fuel, it's really worth checking that your supplier is signed up to one of these, and you're likely to see their emblem on their paperwork or their logo on a bill. So if your supplier isn't signed up to one of those two bodies, then you're at risk of being potentially fleeced or left without a delivery if stocks run low, okay? So that's just a good pointer. And here I've got some information about how people can make savings when they're using alternative fuels, which essentially boils down to bulk buying and ways of managing bulk buying. You know, a general oil tank, for example, will take about 1,000 litres. An oil tanker, a lorry, will take 18,000 litres. So if you can get 18 other people in your village to all fill up their tank completely, you can buy a whole tanker load and get rock bottom prices. But you need to be organised to do that. And each person needs to be able to afford a full tank. A lot of people will only half fill a tank at any one time, which means they're paying more than they could be. But that's, you know, cash flow, and we all face that. So I won't go through all of the details, but again, if you have friends, family or neighbours that are in this situation, we can advise on that at the Bureau. It is another topic we can go over. And that's it. I think I've rattled through that quite well. I don't know how long it's taken me, but the final pointer is just to remind you that one-to-one appointments are available. So if anyone's having trouble with their supplier, if they've got fuel debt, if there are issues around the energy efficiency of their property and you're not finding the right place to go to get advice, there are always one-to-one appointments. We may have a short waiting list, but if you phone up the Bureau with details of your specific issue, then you'll either get me or one of our fantastic volunteers working side by side with you to get it resolved. I hope that's been useful for everybody.